Welcome back to the Pulse. Around the world, many governments are preparing for the festive season with the global economic crunch top of the agenda. But here in Ghana, government will have to deal with the turbulence on the labor front. First is organized labor's rejection of government's debt exchange program as they call a strike to demand that workers' pensions be exempt from that slash. The problem is even rather compounded by the pushback from the country's bondholders. Well, they've constituted a committee to engage government in response to the announcements that certain categories of external debts, whilst the clock takes towards December 27 deadline, government would also have to deal with workers' demand for a 60% increase in their base pay, actually. That negotiation has also been acrimonious, with Labour standing its grounds at 60% until just a week ago when they, of course, softened to a 50% hike in terms of the demand that they are making. Not a good time to be in government with all these pressures on your hands. Well, this afternoon on The Pulse, we're delving into these issues and finding out the turbulence that's happening and how it would obviously impact you and myself. So let's bring in Isaac Ofiaje with our research desk, who's been monitoring all of these happenings. Isaac, let's start off with a demand from organized labor. They are asking that pensions be exempt from the debt exchange program that the government is running. What more do we know about that program? The deadline has been extended. Any further updates on that?
Well, so this has actually become prudent or something the government must do because it's an IMF condition. Remember, we had a discussion on the current IMF 3 billion that if your debt levels are unsustainable, you have to go the long way to do a debt restructuring program before you be given the green light to actually go ahead to assess the package. And so government announced first was the domestic debt restructuring, and now we know there's going to be some form of restructuring for external creditors as well. But we're looking at domestic. That's where some of these issues have come up, especially those who are holding government bonds. And so if you look at government bonds, for instance, we have the ESLA bond and then also the Dachi bonds. And in there, we have, some of these pensions funds being used as, going to buy securities in actually these bonds. So if you look at ESLA bond, for instance, for 2020 and 2021, amount of pension funds, including SNIT, with ESLA bonds is about 1.83 billion Ghana cedis. And also, if you look at that of Dachi bonds, it's around, I think, 485.4 million, Ghana cedis. So
this
so if
is
you combine the
organized.
two, this is actually from the 2021 debt 2021, debt report.
Right.
So if you combine, pension securities with ESLA and then also with Dachi bonds, if you sum the two, is somewhere around, some 2.2 or more than 2.2 billion Ghana cedis of pension funds actually being used to buy government securities. It's not just, workers saying that they will not allow government to actually restructure their pension funds or something like that, but also we know that, one thing that has actually become a key issue here is compensation of employees. Now, organized labor is asking for 58% of an increase in their base pay. We know last year they requested for 25%. Government gave them 7%. This year, government is saying next year I can only afford 18%. So if you look at the chart on the screen right now, you're actually seeing the amount that government is using every year to actually compensate workers, including wages and salaries. Government is already anticipating that in 2023 they will have some of these agitations.99 That's why they are increasing, compensation of employees from 35.84 billion Ghana cedis to 44.99 billion Ghana cedis in 2023. What's actually, accounting for this 25% increment in the compensation of employees, we do not really know, but we know that workers have issues. They want their base pay to be increased. Also, they do not want their pension funds to be restructured.
But then we do know that compensation is also taking a huge toll on our national budget.
Well, so currently we need space, okay? So the space that we need is for us to be able to accommodate the 3 billion IMF program. Before I came to the studio, we're actually looking at our external debt, which has actually become an issue currently. And if you do the math, every year we are paying close to $2.4 billion, to service external debts, including principals, interest payments, and then also charges. So bless that if you are spending $2.4 billion every year to service debt, external alone, and IMF is giving you, let's say, $3 billion for a 3-year program, it means that if you compare the total amount that you're actually spending to service your external debt, it's more or less about 87.5% of what you're actually receiving from the IMF. So if you take IMF's money and you are going to use that money upfront, you use close to 87.5% of that money to service your external debt alone. You need money to also service your domestic debt. So the key banter here is that governments actually first defaulted on its payment on domestic debt. We print cedis. So if you're a government and you default on payment of your debt in your domestic currency, it sends signal ahead that you can't also pay for your debt in external currency. And that's what the finance minister actually announced yesterday, that it would be very difficult to actually, service our debts 2020. So they want a suspension. If we are able to get the suspension, then governments will be relieved from paying the $21.5 billion budgeted amount that they are saying they're going to use to pay for interest payments next year. That's close to $2.2 billion. That money will create space for government to actually do other things. But if this thing does not go through, then it means government is really going to struggle next year and even beyond. Because if you look at the Eurobond, for instance, we are supposed to pay close to $7.85 billion. If you look at the 10 years ahead of us, and about I think 70% or 43% of this money is supposed to be paid in the first 5 years ahead of us.
And there are comparisons of what's going on under the IMF program and what will happen post that period when, of course, we complete the program. What are we to expect?
Well, actually, when IMF is actually in your court, you expect that inflation will come down. You expect that your currency will be stable. You also expect that your external reserves will be strengthened, or you get more external reserves, because IMF is going to take care of, if not all, is going to help you meet your what we call your balance of payments for the next 3 years. They're going to help you. Balance of payment actually really affects your external reserves, and as a result of that, it puts a lot of pressure on your local currency, resulting in a depreciation. So if you have IMF in the boat going to help you settle your balance of payment for the next 3 years ahead, you are sure that any other money you get, you're going to put it into judicious use rather than using it to settle loans and other things. So we know inflation is somewhere around 50%, but once the IMF program starts, we are expecting that inflation will come down possibly to 25 or 28, just like Bank of Ghana or the Ministry of Finance is targeting. There's a template for us to follow, which is Zambia. Right after they got the IMF approval, the executive board approval, we've seen their inflation dropping from a double digit now to a single digit. The Zambian kwacha is also one of the best performing currency against the dollar right now. So if you look at this template and what's going on across countries that have already taken the lead and getting an IMF package and what is actually impacting on their economy. Ghana, we are really hopeful that when we start this program, a lot of things will come down. And, currently we are actually seeing, the CD appreciating, and it's good news for everybody.
Isaac Ofeje with our research desk. At the flip side, though, there's another fire on the mountain. The workers don't actually want government to touch their pension funds in its debt restructuring. The TUC Secretary General, Dr. Yao has been addressing a news conference on this matter.
You may recall that exactly 1 week ago, we said we were asking government to exempt us from the debt exchange program. We sent the letter and we told the whole world that if government doesn't do that, we will advise ourselves. Today, we are here to tell you the advice we have given to ourselves. Yes. And that advice is very simple. We have decided, all of us together, that because government has refused until today, by midday of today to grant us our request that all pension funds, and we are not exempting anything, all pension funds must be exempted from the domestic debt exchange program. We have decided firmly that all workers of Ghana are going to strike on the 27th of December, and we will be on strike until our demand has been granted. And the demand is simple, that all pension funds must be exempted from the debt exchange program. And what it means is that all workers of Ghana should stay at home on the 27th of, starting from 27th. Don't go to work, stay at home. And we will stay at home until we hear publicly that government has exempted all pension funds from the domestic exchange program. That is straightforward and very simple. Between now and 27th, we have a few days to Christmas. From tomorrow, in fact, we have started today, every worker in this country must signal to government and to their employers that we are not sitting down for our pension funds for the most vulnerable people in this country to suffer because somebody has made mistakes. We are going to be in our red band, red t-shirt until we hear on the 27th. And we are not meeting here again. 27th, if we haven't heard anything, we start a strike. If we hear anything positive, we organize another press conference and tell the whole world that the strike is over. But that is when the exemption has been announced.
Well, Eurobond holders have constituted a committee to engage government on its debt restructuring plans following an announcement yesterday that certain categories of the country's external debt have been suspended. Here's Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta.
Ladies and gentlemen, in order to recover all, we still have a lot of work to do before the end of the year in order to gain the full benefit of the debt exchange program. Following the stakeholder engagements, government has agreed to extend the expiration date for the domestic debt exchange to 30th December 2022 to allow for key concerns raised by stakeholders to be accommodated in some form. The launch of the debt exchange program, coupled with the signing of the staff level agreement with the IMF, have aided our stability efforts and have in particular contributed significantly to the rebound of our currency. While accommodating the inputs of stakeholders, we must do all we can to sustain the gains of these initiatives, keeping in sight the urgency of obtaining IMF board approval in Q1 2023. The cost of this not succeeding will be too huge for our economy. That is why we urge Parliament to support us in getting the appropriations bill for the 2023 fiscal year passed.
Okay, now let's engage a Labour economist on how government can deal with the issues coming up. Dr. Patrick Isowing is an economist and a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School. Thank you, Doc, for your time. A very delicate issue. What, in your estimation, can government be doing now to deal with some of these issues happening on the labour front? Let's start with the demands by labour. Doc, if you can hear me, I'm just asking about your view on what it is that government could be doing, starting off with the demands by organised labour.
Good afternoon to you and good afternoon to viewers. I think the starting point is, for government to do what it should have done in the beginning, and that is have a proper engagement with organised labour. I think when the exchange program was announced, we would have expected that there would be a lot of consultations, but even though the government says I consulted, it's obvious that given the complaints that have come, there are many people, many directly affected stakeholders who see this as coming out of the blue. So it simply means that the consultation was not fully done. So I think it's important for the government to consult and to explain, and also listen to immediately what the concerns are, and try and find middle ground with organized labor, and to see, what alternatives and what options are available to get around this debt exchange deadlock that we are seeing. You have to understand that it's not just the organized labor. I think all other groups that have spoken have all expressed concern about supporting this the debt exchange. And so I think it's important. The starting point is an engagement. Then the government should also see. So it would be important to see where it can reconsider the terms of the debt exchange, but also maybe if you have to revisit the 2023 budget and see if there are any adjustments that can be made to ensure that we soften the impact on the pensions a little bit, or soften the terms of the debt exchange, and try to see where we can pick up with the budget.
What do you feel are the options open to government now? Because the fear is, looking at the limited fiscal space government has, it will not be able to make resources available for such payments.
Well, I think it's definitely a difficult position. I think the concern that Labour has is that if you look at how we are sharing the difficult decisions that we have to make. I mean, it seems like we are pushing way too much onto the debt holders, and that there's a sense that the government has not done enough to change the way government runs and to change the way government spends. So I think there's that part of that. So there's that side where people feel that ordinary Ghanaians are not directly responsible for the difficulties that we are in. It is government decision-making that has brought us here, the main. That's one side. And on the other side, when a decision had to be made, it feels that the government didn't really come to the table and discuss and come to an agreement before announcing it. And there's a sense that government is doing a give or take agreement. And I think that's why we are seeing the level of resistance that we are seeing. So I think, going back to the table and reset and then have fresh discussions. We know there are difficult options, but if these options have been explained and it has been made obvious to the holders of the bond that, this is the best case we can come up with, I'm sure the resistance wouldn't have been what we have seen.
So there's the issue also about the debt exchange, which is also feeding into all of this, because government would have to first of all deal with the pay rise and the issue of the debt exchange. Which of them should government be giving much more priority to at this moment?
I think the debt exchange seems to be a much more pressing need at the moment, because it's a major condition for going ahead with the IMF program, which at the moment it looks like outside of the IMF program, the government doesn't have any other plan. So it becomes more important. Also, the domestic, having a deal on the domestic debt exchange will somewhat help with what we do with our foreign creditors. So I think while you can't say we should put aside the discussion on the salary increment, but all of them have to be tackled. But if you have to pick one that you should focus on immediately, I think that would be the debt exchange, because we've also set a deadline for that. If that deadline comes and we still have to postpone it again, that in itself will send another wrong signal to the investors. So I think it's important that there's more engagement and we come to an agreement as soon as possible.
Well, Doc, we've been getting some updates from the ongoing negotiations here in Accra on the issues happening on the labor front. I just want us to listen to an interaction between my colleague Michael Niashale and the Deputy Secretary General of TUC, Joshua Ansah, a while ago before the negotiations started. I'll get your thoughts on that, Dr. Zumin, right after the engagement.
Had been postponed for another date.
But just to give us a sneak peek into what Labour, what your idea was going to be. The last time I heard it was 58%. You had come down from 65. I mean, what were you coming to the meeting with?
Oh no, my brother. We are coming to the meeting to listen to what the government is prepared to offer us. Yes, that was our plan of this.
But the last time they didn't give you any figure. So were you hoping that it will go up now?
That's our hope. But if they don't go up, we don't expect us also to do anything.
But many say you're holding a gun to their head. You have declared a strike on one side. You are refusing to allow your pensions to be part of the negotiations. So how do you expect us to get more money to pay you? You're asking for more, at least for now, 58% more.
58%, I think people do not understand why we're asking for the 60%, for which you account to 58. It's a simple analogy. You see, the base pay by law should be higher than the minimum wage. As I speak to you, the base pay is far, far, far lower than the minimum wage. As I speak to you now, the base pay is 11 cedis, 33 pesos. The minimum wage is 14.88. In bridging the gap, we need about 31.33% to come at par with the base pay. That alone is 31%. So if you are negotiating at this time, there's no way that you accept anything less than 31% plus. Because that will bring you at par to the minimum wage. Then there should be 10% over and above the minimum wage. If you add 10% to that 30-something, it pushes you to 40 plus. And people think that we are just asking for percentage increase with no reason. There are bases for that. If government should even bring our minimum base pay at par with the minimum wage, it's already 31 plus percent. Plus the 10%, 40 plus. And you are already enjoying a COLA of 15%. You add it. There is a relativity of 1.7 that has not been applied for more than since the inception of this base pay. So these are some of the things you need to know before you talk about we are becoming insensitive and this and that and that. Nobody is holding a gun at the head of anybody. No way. We are only negotiating.
So in the last meeting, you also spoke about inflation.
Yeah.
But the inflation numbers that we have now, it seems that inflation is slowing down. Are you hoping to double down?
Are you sure that is slowing down?
I mean, they are hoping that because the CD to dollar rate has decreased from November to now, in January.
Hope. No. Let us be factual. Are you talking about hope or facts? What is the inflation today? Inflation today is 50.4.
Yeah, it's going up.
So from 40 something, 50 and now it's 0.4. So it's going up. It's never coming down. That is what you need to know. Yeah.
So you are not willing to come down any further from 58?
Oh, that one, when we get to the negotiating table, you'll negotiate.
But this will be the second time that government has failed to also give you a figure at least to
today
work
the meeting did not start at all. I won't mention it. We didn't start the meeting at all due to not forming a quorum.
The government side.
But we hope that when we meet again, we will bring this negotiation to a close. If government is ready, we are also ready.
Now,
Well, Doc, so it appears that Labour is going hard on inflationary figures, a reason for which they're not willing to go below the 40% threshold. Are their demands justified?
Well, I think if you listen to the voice we just played, obviously they've done their calculations and said that government haven't lived up to the past commitments. And you know, we've seen that indeed the cost of living has gone up. The inflation is way higher than we currently projected, for which government has given some form of the COLA in the middle of the year. But don't forget that since the COLA was given, the inflation has gone up way more than then. So we have, this is a path we have chosen. We've chosen a path that salaries, public sector wages will be by negotiation. So I think, we are going to have to go and engage. My sense is that maybe the engagement has been too late. Usually this should have been agreed before the budget was read, and it wasn't done. And my sense is that there's a whole lot of, the government seems to have a credibility problem in terms of the management of the economy, and also how, people are very skeptical that things will actually improve. So it also forms part of the reason why we've seen some of the entrenched positions that the Labour is having. If there was a sense that things will improve and the inflation will come down and the cost of living will come down, I'm sure they will be much more willing. Then the other side is, so it's for Labour to demand. What Labour demands is their pay. What government has to demand also is productivity. So I think that is that aspect of the debate always get missing in the picture. But it's not on the worker to extract the productivity. It's on the payer to extract the employer to extract the productivity. So always those things have to go hand in hand. But at the moment, it appears that most of our labor negotiations are based on cost and then agreement that we have. And then on that score, labor has to demand what is their due. What I wish, government could do is to explain to labor why at this point in our nation's history, given the challenges we have, and to convince them that, maybe you all need to make sacrifices. And then for government to demonstrate the sacrifices they are making. And therefore, expect that Labour also make sacrifices to explain that at this point, if you grant these increases, there will be more challenges for the economy. I'm not sure that that has been done. And so all of this come together explain why, Labour is holding the position it has.
We want to thank you so much, Dr. Patrick Isuming, for joining us. He's an economist helping us with the discussion. Let's get the latest on what's happening in terms of the negotiation between government and Labour for you. Michael Niashale is monitoring all of that. He's joining us live now with the latest on this. Michael, what can you report? The last time you were there were two sides. Of course, the two sides actually failed to reach any concrete agreement despite government's decision to come somewhere close to the demands of Labour. Bring us up to speed with what's happening now.
Okay, Brace, sorry, not Brace, but Blessed, what exactly we know now is that the meeting that was scheduled to take place today was called off eventually because the side of government did not have the quorum to have this particular conversation. So usually, who are you expecting on the side of government? You are expecting the Fair Wages and Fair Wages Commission. You're expecting the Ministry of Finance. You're expecting the Ministry of Labour and Employment, and then you're expecting some other groups that are associated. But chiefly, these four main individuals are the people you're expecting to be here. Usually, the Minister for Employment together with his deputy, that is Ignatius Bafwewa, and then Bright Rakubrobe will both be at this meeting making government side four. And then on the side of Labour, you have virtually almost every one of those labour unions represented from the civil service area. You have CLOCSAG, you'd have the TUC, their mother body, you'd have the teacher unions, you have TEU, you have NAT, you'd have NAGRAT here, you have the university teachers as well. So it cuts across. Even have the medical associations already represented. You have that of the nurses and then that of the doctors all represented. But today, as we understand it, the part of Labour represented. But on the side of government, we understand that the minister, the deputy minister of finance did not come. And it was only the side of the Minister for Employment and his deputy that were in this meeting. Even for that, I understand that they had to attend to some urgent matters in Parliament. So you'd have his deputy, for instance, who left quite early in that particular meeting. So no quorum today in this particular meeting. But today is not the first time they're meeting. This will be like the set time these two groups are sitting to negotiate their base pay for the 2023 working year. What has happened so far? So Labour came into this conversation starting from well over 100% increment for the 2023 year. Initially, government said it will not be able to meet that particular demand. Government started at 8%, not forgetting that in the 2022 year, Labour was given a 7% increment on their base pay. in the year 2021, they gave them 4. So just to give you an understanding of what we are dealing with now. So Labour is starting more than 100%. Government started at 8. The subsequent meetings, Labour reduced it all the way to 60%. In that meeting, government offered to give them 10% and later went to 12%. That did not augur well with Labour. Labour subsequently, whilst we saw inflation figures go up beyond the 40% mark, Labour went up to 65%. So initially 60, they now went up 5% more. And government said they were going to give them 18 now. Now, right from the 18, that was it, 3 meetings from now ago, that number came down from the Labour side from 65 to 58 in their last meeting. But that particular meeting, what we know is that government failed to give them any number or any indication that was willing to go up or so the 18% remained. That brings us to today's meeting, where government did not have the quorum to continue with the meeting. We understand only 2 people on that side were represented. Labour left here very much unhappy with the how these negotiations are panning out. Ordinarily, this meeting should have happened sometime before the last quarter of the year so that the Minister of Finance can also inculcate these percentages into the budget. But the budget has already been read and appropriation is currently ongoing in Parliament.
My colleague Michael Niashali giving us the latest will definitely get you updates in our subsequent bulletin. Michael, thank you. The Ghana Private Road Transport Union, GPRTU, has issued a memo to all of its branches across the country to adjust transport fares to reflect the slump in fuel prices on the Ghanaian market. After a series of negotiations with the Ghana Road Transport Coordinating Council, public transport service providers agreed fares to slash fares actually by some 15.3%. However, some drivers are still reluctant in enforcing the reduction in the fares. To reinforce that position, GPRTU has tabled a memo to all of its local branches across the country. Here are excerpts on your screens right now of what it is that the GPRTU is asking its members to comply with. Of course, it reads that the general public may recall that on Saturday, the 29th of October, a 19% upward adjustment in public transport fares took effect after the intense negotiation with stakeholders. With the recent reductions in the price of petroleum products, it became necessary to engage stakeholders to give consideration to review the fares in line with the administrative instrument. Consequently, a series of negotiations and meetings were held with stakeholders to agree on the acceptable level of fare reductions commensurate with the current fuel prices. And beyond that, the group is indicating that following these negotiations and in consideration of the plight of the drivers, commuters and the general will have resolved to reduce the existing transport fares by some 15.3%. And so that fare will cover fare taxis, intercity transport, and haulage tracks as well. I want to bring in now Samuel Amwa. He's member of the National Communications Team for the GPRTU. Samuel, thank you for your time. In fact, you're not the only ones trying to readjust, because what we do know is that the Used Clothes Dealers Association in Kantamanto are also doing same. But Samuel, let me, even before we hear from your counterparts dealing in used clothes in Kantamanto, I just want to hear from you what practical steps you're taking now to engage your members who are reluctant in reducing the fares.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me say good afternoon to your viewers. When we had a meeting with the transport minister, we agreed that the transport fares, must be reduced by 15.3%. So quickly, we signed a communique, and at the same time, the normal procedure that we used to use whenever we increase our fares, we use the same procedure by doing our calculations in terms of our.
Samuel? Well, we've lost someone there, but we'll just try as much. Okay, Samuel, we'll ask you briefly on the point you're making. Samuel, if you could just take that for us again.
Yes, what I was saying is that the procedure that we used to do, or we used to take whenever we are increasing our transport fare, that is the same procedure we used. We did our calculation just after the meeting with the transport minister, just after the agreement was made. We did our calculations and we wrote a circular. We sent it across, all the assistant regions, and we also asked them to send it down to their various branches and the locals to make sure that they go by these directives. That is a 15.3, reduction. So our expectation was that all our members will comply with these directives, and the compliance was there. Although yesterday we had some few challenges from other places. When we had information, we reached them, and then some of them were saying that the letters couldn't reach them on time. That is why they couldn't do the adjustment. So we quickly asked them to do so. And some too, we find out that some of the challenges was also coming from the floaters that are not belonging to any of the associations. So as of now, we are making sure that all our members will comply strictly by the calculation that we have made and send it to all of them for them to go by it.
So what do you feel is that major factor accounting for that reluctance on the part of some of your members in terms of reducing the fares, just to be in line with what it is that you've directed them to do? Samuel, if you can hear me, I'm just asking why you feel there's some sort of reluctance on the part of your members in reducing the fares in spite of this memo and directive that you're issuing to them.
Yes, as I said earlier, when the complaints started coming, we find out that, this has been, I think, the second time that this reduction is coming. And some of them were finding it a bit difficult to do the calculation. And then also, we also got to know that the calculation we did and the circular we sent couldn't reach most of the members, on time. That is why most of them were not complying. But as I'm speaking now, those areas that we find out that they are not complying, quickly we call the leadership and we make sure that they are all compliant.
So going forward, what would you want commuters to know in terms of how the prices have reduced?
Yes, what I want every commuter to understand is that most especially the floating, drivers that don't belong to any of the association, whenever there is an increment, is the GPRTU and the GRTCC together with the Transport Ministry that we meet before an information will come. Then, based on our information, they all, adjust to it. They make sure that the increment, they also enjoy the increment. So now that we've also come out with a reduction, the same way they also have to, adjust and, comply. Although they don't belong to our association, they all have to comply because these are the directives that we represent all the transport operators across the country. So they must, go by this 15.3, percent reduction, so that there will be peace and then there will be sanity on our roads.
And earlier this week, when I was interacting with you, you pointed out that spare parts were part of some of the challenges you're experiencing in terms of the cost build-up. Has that been out of the way, or at least dealt with by the various stakeholders, i.e. the Sogah spare parts dealers, or the trades ministry?
Can you come out again?
I was just talking about the spare parts bit. You were complaining that it was part of the cost build-up, a reason for which you would want some you want the prices of the spare parts to be reduced. So in effect, we can have a further reduction in transport fares. I'm asking if any engagements have happened in line with that.
Yes, we had the Spare Parts Dealers Association, came out that spare.
Samuel? We've lost.
We still want the government or the ministry to also, Ministry of Trade, to also go in there to make sure that since the dollar is coming down, they also have to comply, because we used all these calculations to do in terms of transport fare review, these are the calculations we normally use. The spare part comes in, the lubricant comes in, and also the taxes also comes in. So should these spare parts come down a little bit more, it may even push us also to think of maybe reducing our transport fares whenever the fuel prices also comes down.
Samuel Amoah, I'm grateful. He's a member of the National Communications team for GPRTU. Meanwhile, Used Clothes Dealers Association in Cantonment, they are also responding favorably to the calls for a reduction in the prices of goods and services. The group says it is reducing prices of its products by 30%, according to leadership of the trading community. It is only prudent to reduce their prices. Obriebo, a spokesperson for the Used Clothing Traders Association, is joining us via Zoom now. Thank you, Obriebo, for your time here on The Pulse. So what's informing this decision? We know that obviously the cedi is gaining some marginal stability. Beyond that, are there some more factors that we need to know about?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think based on our release this afternoon, I hope the line is clear.
I can hear you loud and clear, sir.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear, yes.
We are also, it's all about the reduction of the dollar. And we also need to let the government know we do appreciate and want to acknowledge that good effort. And in view of that, the members of into the final consumer. That is why we came up with a 30% reduction, so that we know we are in the festive season. People need to buy, people need to celebrate. But you can't go away without coming to a cantonment or the likes of where you can get clothing to wear to do your proper celebration. Again, today we got a news that, when you get to the port, when you do your clearance, we use the USD to do the calculation for the import duty. That one too was 13, and now it has dropped to 8 per dollar. With
Obriebo, I'm losing you intermittently. I don't know if you could just
the margin is very huge.
Yeah, if you could just take that point for us again. You were talking about how perhaps the exchange rate and some other factors are favoring you now, a reason for which you would want to reduce your prices.
Yeah, like I said earlier on, initially dollar went up to 16 and it keeps going. Currently, we know the BOG, within 3 weeks now, it's going down. And once it's dropping, we also need to let it reflect on the final consumer. And then again, too, when you get to the port, with the clearance at the port, they also use the USD to calculate for the duty. And they were using 13 USD. But as I'm talking to you now, just today, the breaking news we had from the port is they are using 8 instead of the 13. So you can look at the margin. And this is the reason why we also came up as an executive and as a good citizen. We also wanted to reflect on the final consumer. That's why we make that decision.
Do you feel that we could go below the 30% reduction that you've just announced?
Yeah, that is what we are all hoping for. It depends. The more the city get the appreciation, we will still adjust the price. And like we said, we don't have much restriction on the pricing, but it's just an appeal that we are doing to our members to adjust the prices because they've all seen it. It is like it's all reflecting. So if this is the situation, why not? We also need to appreciate what the government is doing and also let it reflect. And like I said earlier on, we are in the festive season. People need to celebrate. You need a good clothing. you need a nice dress, shoes, bags. Then if the prices are going down, I think the pressure in town can also come down a little bit. That's why we are taking this initiative.
Aside what's happening at the ports, what else influences the cost of the products that you sell, for which you may want some more intervention from government?
Yeah, we have a lot to do, which the government is aware. Though I'm also part of the BUTA, we think we've sent our proposal and the government is aware. I think the major one is the dollar, which now things are going down a little bit for us. When there was the crisis or when the pressure was in town, yeah, we did a lot of demonstration, a lot of meetings, bashing the government. So if we have seen changes, I think it's very good to know. The more the prices to in the market, it will go by the changes depending on the situation. And with the second-hand clothing, one thing is we are all not importing from one country. We have some from China, some from Korea, UK, London, Canada, and US. And the prices are not the same. So sometimes it depends on the country where the goods are coming from. Others are higher than, the varieties. But if you prefer the quality one, you need to pay more. But we are also appealing to the government just to maintain the situation so that we've lost a lot of capital. If this situation can even go down again for us, we will appreciate. And
do you want a special? Is it the case that you want a special dispensation, something special to be handed to your group, since you don't import from the same location?
In fact, the government is helping the second-hand clothing because he knows our volume. Just even a month, in previous time when the dollar is normal, we used to clear almost 200 containers within just a week to two. And when things went wrong, when you come to Kantamanto, the place was empty. And I believe the more we import, the more the revenue too, that the government can also make good use of that revenue. So I think we wish it will go down even more than this because we've lost a lot of money. And we are also appealing to our members. They should also take the situation in good faith so that we can also let it reflect on the final consumers. That is our major.
Well, it's quite unfortunate. We've lost Aubrey Yeboah, who's spokesperson of the Used Clothes Dealers Association of Kantamanto. You're watching The Pulse. Well, my colleague Michael Niajale has been interacting with some of the traders within Kantamanto. Here's what we found out.
This is Kantamanto Market, right at the heart of the Greater Accra region. Also, one of the biggest markets in the city. Arguably, it is one of the easiest places to find used clothing. Just a few hours ago, the Association of Used Clothing Dealers announced a 30% reduction in their wares, following the performance and the appreciation of the Ghana cedi against the dollar, and again, the ease of doing business at the ports. Let's check out some of the shops and how this will translate into how much you buy your jeans and your used clothing.
Oh, the previous day it goes high, but as at last week, it has come down. But the goods is old stock, so we can't reduce it drastically as they used to previous. It's gradual. Maybe 2023 there. If the dollar stay as is harder, maybe we can reduce.
Until how soon can we expect the prices of your wares to come down? Give us a window, say a month or two.
A month. Let's take a month.
But currently, how much are you selling your bales?
Oh, we have cotton dress. Cotton dress, at first we sell it 3,500. But since last week, we sell it 3,200. So we are reducing small. Oh, we have household, bedsheets and towels. We sell it 1,004, but now we sell it 1,200.
So we are in one of those shops that deals in used clothing. Let's see how exactly this announcement will translate into the wares that they sell. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What's your name?
I'm Nanesi.
Okay.
And this is my shop. My shop name is S. Joan Enterprise. I'm into used clothing.
Wonderful, Nanesi. So 30% reduction, that's what the leadership have announced. But let's first walk us through how you do the business. So I see these are bales of clothing, right? That's what you call it, right? Bales of clothing. So what particularly is this?
This is men's jeans.
Okay.
At the moment when the dollar is up, we are selling it 4,000.
Wow. So 4,000 just from here to here. Yes. Everything inside of it is 4,000 Ghana cedis.
4,000 Ghana cedis.
That's very high.
Yes, because the dollar was high. But at this moment, we are trying to come down a little bit. Right now, I'm selling at 3,800. But we hope this is an old stock. So when the new stock comes, we can even drop it to at least 3,500 or lesser than that.
Oh, I see. So you are selling in bales, so you don't deal in individual jeans. So say if I wanted to buy jeans, so if a 4,000 bale of clothing, what would that translate into a single jeans?
That depends on the people who opens it.
Okay.
The much that they will get it in will tell them how much they should sell it. Some are nice, some are not nice, so that will depend on them.
Okay. But who bears the cost whether it's nice or not?
I mean, they are going to bear the cost.
Okay, I see. So because of the CD, you had to sell it at 4,000
yes.
when the CD was somewhere 14 Ghana cedis to the dollar.
Yes.
But now we are seeing somewhere below 10 Ghana cedis. You are promising that it may even go down below. But you don't sell just jeans, right?
Yes.
So the other items that you have,
I have dresses,
okay.
Ladies' dresses.
Okay.
That also, we have silk dress and cotton dress. The silk dresses sell 6,000, but at this moment, I'm trying to sell it 5,500. At this moment, and we hope if new stock comes, since the money is coming down, and we hope it will come down more than it's coming, so we would reduce it at least into 4,000.
Wow. So it will come down from 5,000 to 4,000.
Yes.
Wow.
Hopefully.
That's a lot. That's 1,000 that you are taking out of that. That made it very difficult to do business when the dollar was appreciating against the cedi.
Yes, but when you ask me, I could say that before the dollar went to 15 cedis, we were having an old stock. So we have to sell it to suit the money. At this moment, the money is coming down. So we also have to come down. In any way, after all, the market is competition. So if you are not coming down, then people will be doing it and you'll be still there.
I see. But there's a question of enforcement here. Can they force you to reduce it? Or you think you are just doing it because you think that is right?
We are doing it because of the dollar. Okay. If the government is helping us, and now the duty is a bit down, and the freight also is a bit down. So if all those things, the government is helping us because of that, then we have to appreciate the government, and we also have to come down so that the people, the consumers also will be free and to do their business also.
Wow. This is very interesting. So if the dollar begins to go up, what will happen to your business?
We also increase. If the dollar goes up, we also go up. If the dollar comes down, we comes down.
I mean, but most of the people, the patrons that buy from you, people say you are quick to increase it when the dollar seems to be appreciating against the cedi. But when the cedi is doing very well against the dollar, you are slow in implementing the change.
As you can see, this is an old stock. You can't drop immediately like that. If the government has reduced into 3% or 15%, then you drop 15%. It will go gradually.
I see. So these are jeans, these are women's clothing. What else do you have here? What's the price that you are selling at right now?
We have three-quarter, which is ladies three-quarter. We have lightweight, which is children clothes. And we have ladies t-shirt at the back also. This is men t-shirt as well.
And how much is the men t-shirt going for?
At the matter of fact, we are selling it 4,000. At this moment, we are selling it 3,800.
So why the 200 difference?
As I said, this is an old stock.
Okay.
Since the money is coming down, everyone would like to sell at least to get some of the money.
Okay.
So when you drop some, it will help you to go faster. Then you also can get the sum of the dollar.
I see. Nanesi, let me thank you very much. So we just heard from Nanesi. She runs this particular shop here. These are supposed to be second-hand clothing or used clothing. The association announced a 30% reduction, and they were only entreating their membership to follow suit and reduce the price of their wares so that the ordinary person on the street can afford to buy. Nanesi just explained to us that in the event that the cedi appreciates more against the dollar, they are also interested in reducing their wares further down. But in the event that it takes the other way around, well, they will also decide to increase their price. But currently, as it stands, she says she's willing to reduce the price of their bills, some of which are going for 4,000 Ghana cedis. They're willing to sell it at 3,800 and may even go down to 3,500 if the cedi continues to perform as it is doing right now. Well, as to how this will translate into how you buy your ordinary shirt or jeans by the side of the road, it only remains to be seen how that will also be enforced. For JoyNews, Michael Ashali.
You're watching The Pulse. We'll be back shortly. Parliament, where the Minority Leader Haruna Iddrisu wants Parliament to accept its share of responsibility for the current economic difficulties the country is facing. Haruna Iddrisu says the crisis is due to the excessive borrowing by successive governments, particularly this government. Speaking during a core leadership conference organized by the Ministry for Parliamentary Affairs, Haruna Iddrisu argued that Parliament has been lax in its oversight responsibility and has just allowed almost loans through without stamping its authority.
Today, Ghana has an economic crisis, a crisis which is only similar to what pertained in the country in 1983. How did we get there? Excessive borrowing. Who ought to have checked government not to borrow or overborrow? The Parliament of Ghana. So Parliament must accept some blame and some responsibility in not keeping the executive to check. The consequences of excessive borrowing is now being felt by all of us when you hear an animal called a debt exchange initiative. It is affecting businesses, it's affecting public enterprises because they cannot run well, it's affecting the private sector. So Parliament's role as defender of the people's interests is lost. So how did we get there? How come that we couldn't anticipate it? Article 181, it is only Parliament that approves the terms and conditions of a loan. So if we borrowed and now we have exceeded 100% of GDP, how did it happen? And a typical example of the intense partisanship I spoke about, how could a Sino-Hydro loan get approval from Ghana's Parliament if Ghana's Parliament was to sit right? You have government arguing that Sino-Hydro, I'm doing battle of bauxite, when the road to the bauxite site is not even constructed. The Parliament of Ghana ought, in the defense of the people's interests, ought to have rejected that because the battle has failed. Sino-Hydro is due for payment. You don't have the bauxite. Parliament has reduced itself to a clearinghouse for executive embarrassment. When the executive brings something, then all of us, and I'm not talking about just an 8th or 7th Parliament, when you can talk of CNTI loan, you can talk of STS loan, they bring something to Parliament. We are not ready to scrutinize it and tell them in the face that this is not good enough for the country.
Well, his colleague, Majority Leader Osei Mensah-Bonsu, who's also the Minister for Parliamentary Affairs, attributed the poor oversight from Parliament to weak committee structures. He proposes that some strong committees in the House should be chaired by the opposition party.
The Minority Leader has related to excessive borrowing. And I think he and I have been discussing this. When a country is engaged in deficit financing, the chicken certainly will come home to roost at a point in time. That's what we are seeing. That is what you're saying. Over the past 20, 25 years, every year, routinely, when we have budgets presented to us, we do know that we have to borrow to survive as a country. And that's what routinely, that's what we've been doing. And when you know that your resources are not able to match your appropriated amount, what will happen eventually? The edifice will collapse. And I agree with him. I have always been saying on the floor that we want to strengthen Parliament, but the Parliament is as strong as its committees make it. The structure of our committee system in Parliament is not helping us to grow our Parliament. When you have a system where all committees are headed by the members from the ruling party, certainly you have these dividends. You really lower the standards of Parliament, which is why since 1993, our Parliament has always been rated very lowly when it comes to the performance of our oversight responsibilities. In France, as I keep saying, the Finance Committee, like the Public Accounts Committee, is chaired by a member from the party that's not in control of government. When I asked, I was told that it is because the Finance Committee is a fulcrum of governance, and nothing should be hidden from the opposition party. So the chairman of the Finance Committee, just as the Public Accounts Committee, is headed by a member from a party that's not in control of government. We should be learning useful lessons from that.
Well, let's head to Parliament now and speak to Parliamentary Affairs correspondent Kweku Asante, who's joining us for more on this. Kweku, you've been engaging the NP for Supreme Eugene Boakye. He and his group have returned to their resistance movement as they demand the removal of the embattled finance minister. Tell us more about that.
So, Blessed, some very strong words there being used by these majority MPs who are back to their demand that Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta must be dismissed, must lose his job. We know that when they made this request of the president, they met him. The president gave out some, as it were, options. He said that they should allow Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta to stay on until the appropriation, that is the budget, is completely dealt with, and also until government finished talks with the IMF. Tomorrow, the expectation is that Parliament will pass the appropriation budget. That will mean that the budget is out of the way. That is the first option the president gave them. The second layer, having to do with the IMF deal, is currently at the second stage because government has gotten a staff level agreement. And with this staff level agreement over the line, a board approval is all that is left for Ghana to be finally enrolled on an IMF program. So these NPP MPs are back to saying that they expect their President Kufuor, to keep to his side of the bargain. And if you listen to the interview that Eugene Boakye granted me, he used some very strong words. He said that why are NPP MPs and why are people watching on as this nonsense keeps going on? And he is not very enthused about the performance of the finance minister. He references the idea that the finance minister came to them begging that he needed approval for the e-levy. He needed approval for some revenue measures. They approved it for him last year, only for him to end up at the IMF, the same place he said he wasn't going. And so they think that the finance minister, it is time for him to go, and now they expect the president to keep up to his side of the bargain. The other side of the point is that since they made this position known, about 98 of them, the concerns have been that certain powerful elements within the party will want to see their back, will want to see them lose their party primaries, which is said to happen maybe next year, late next year. Eugene Boakye entry tells me that they are unfazed about those criticisms, those threats of losing their seats, and that they are serving their people, and they believe that their people will always back them in return.
According to the matters I hand at that, we have a finance minister who came to this house and met us, the caucus, and said, look, you know what? I won't do IMF. I will not do IMF. Well, I think it's very degrading for a country like ours. But I have 2 revenue streams. Help me make it a reality that will not make us go to IMF.
And you fought tooth and nail to give him that?
Yes, you were here. 2 streams. One was e-levy. He wanted 1.5%. Haina Idrisu, the minority and co wanted 1%. He said, 1.5. We gave him the 1.5. Look at how we fought for him to pass the e-levy. Bill is now an act. What happened? The projected revenues of 300 million. We only got 30 million, 10%. The second revenue stream, property rates. Was that implemented in 2021? These are major policy failures that in any civilized democracy, Kenofurata will not stand on his feet. Why are we entertaining such nonsense? Excuse my French. Why are we? What have we got against him as a person? You brought something to us. We are talking about those issues, and you forget about this. So you're going to insist somebody in their constituency just because you have failed.
It's also because you're frustrating them.
No, who's frustrating them? I stood. You saw us in the chamber.
Yeah, I did.
Fighting our NDC guys to pass the e-levy. You saw us there. So what haven't you done for Kenofurata to succeed as a finance minister? And I said, posterity will judge us. If this thing is personal, posterity will judge. If this is about the soul of this party, posterity will judge.
Well, Kweku, based on this, are we hearing from the minority side as well, who earlier on urged the NPP side to join them past that votes of censure?
Yes, we've heard from Al-Hassan Tunini. I've been speaking to him. He says that the NPP MPs will pay for this. And that if they started something, they ought to have finished it. Leaving this hanging will mean that President Kufuor will now get the opportunity to come after them. We can listen to it.
Believe that many of them will suffer the consequences, especially during their primaries. Because one, the President Nana Akufo-Addo has shown since he became president, and even before that, when he was leader of the NPP, that he's an unforgiving person. And so you go against him and he fights you to the floor. And so they are going to contend with their, open aggression towards him in their internal party primaries. I can bet my last penny that they will. And then they will also be faced with the betrayal of the trust of their people who were expecting them to carry this fight through. And so I won't be surprised if many of them pay for that miscalculation and that wrong judgment call they made to boycott the motion of censure. But we on the minority side, we feel
the 10th of December marked the end to this year's United Nations 16 days of activism against sexual and gender-based violence. This year's theme, which has got to do with activism to end violence against women and girls, called on activists everywhere to continue the push forward against the pushback on women's rights. But exactly how strong is that pushback when justice is being sought for victims of sexual and gender-based violence? Today we have a classic example in the following feature as JoyNews Apple East regional correspondent Albert Sori partners with human rights NGO Rise Ghana to shed light on the plight of a woman whose daughter was raised by an influential man in society. We'll bring that to you shortly, but for now I want us to broaden this conversation and bring in Awal Mohammed, Executive Director for Rise Ghana, a human rights organization. He's joining us via Zoom. Thank you, sir, for the time. 16 days of activism, would you say that that's been helpful? Well, if you can hear me, I'm just asking about how useful the 16 days of activism have been.
Thank you very much for having me. Yes, so first of all, let me say good evening to your good self and good evening to your listeners. It's a great opportunity to...
Awal, if you can hear me, I would advise that you turn off the TV set in front of you. But I was just asking about the positivity and the results you're getting from this 16 days of activism. Awal, can you hear me? I'm just asking how positive this has been, the 16 days of activism.
Yes, so thank you very much, and good evening to your good self and your viewers, as well as those who are streaming and listening to us online. The 16 days of activism is a very important period of 16 days, which is used around the world to galvanize support as well as create awareness about issues of gender-based violence. It's very important that it brings to light the various issues of human rights abuses meted against people because of their gender or sexual orientation and others. And so it's very important that we mark the day. First of all, it galvanizes policy support, it creates awareness at the community level, and mobilizes support in terms of survivors of gender-based violence to be able to get the necessary support that they need. So it's a global exercise that happens across all the countries in the world, and it's a very important time. So over the years, we've been celebrating it this year with the support of our donor, European Union in Ghana and Oxfam, under the Enough project. The 16 days was marked with a series of activities. We also use the opportunity to highlight some of the challenges victims of gender-based violence are facing, as well as support them to be able to get the necessary redress they need from their respective institutions that are mandated to solve such problems.
Do you feel that there's a push forward after this 16 days of activism?
Yeah, so the 16 days of activism, one of the key things we are excited about is that it has created strategic alliances, and we have seen sustained action. Particularly, I want to commend your colleague in the Upper East region, Albert Sore, who has been with us through the 16 days and even before. And beyond that, he is supporting and connecting the dots, talking to people, and building a very strong documentary around the issues of how victims are suffering and the lack of spaces in terms of access to justice. So it has provided an opportunity to build strategic alliances. Even last week, we had a Twitter chat with no other person than Ochame Kwame, a very strong activist and a prolific Ghanaian musician. We know that he has a very strong following. So we had a discussion about the role of men and boys in terms of preventing gender-based violence. So the 16 days of activism has really created a strong strategic alliance between private sector, service providers, communities, and others. And in fact, one of the challenges we have as a civil society organization in terms of working to support survivors of gender-based violence to get access to justice is that some of our traditional authorities are adjudicating criminal cases. You find cases like rape, and you see chiefs and queen mothers trying to sit and adjudicate on these cases. You see cases like defilement, and people want to take it out of the courts and settle it. So with the 16 days of activism, it tends to deepen the awareness about the fact that, yes, as traditional authorities, you are custodians of culture, but there are limitations in terms of what you can do. For instance, the law does not allow anybody to adjudicate criminal cases unless a competent court of competent jurisdiction that can do that. So these days like this provides opportunity, and it has been galvanizing the support from all the stakeholders to be able to address this. And then also it provides opportunity for victims. In this case, I would prefer the word survivors, to be able to air and exercise their rights so that they can speak up and seek redress and access justice that they timely need. And of course, we are part of the day to also create awareness.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, we have also used the day as a strategic day to create awareness about the issues of period poverty. A majority of our girls are period shamed just because they are going through their menses. Some are also not able to afford sanitary pads and others, so they lose out of economic opportunities because they are not able to go to work. They're not going to go to school. They lose out on school days. And we know from research that school is one of the safest environments for adolescent girls and women. And so when they're out of school, they are more likely to be exposed to risk. Some of them lose economic opportunities. So on the 16 days of activism, a series of activities were scheduled, and we addressed topical issues affecting the girl child and women in particular, zeroing around issues of gender-based violence in terms of economic, cultural, social, and political violence against women. All these are addressed in the 16 days.
Beyond these interventions you're carrying out as Rise Ghana, are there some policy interventions you want to see in a bid to give that push and edge to civil society in their 16 days of activism?
Yeah, so for instance, we think that, let me first of all also say that the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection have been supportive for and recognizes this International Day, 16 days of activism, and has been engaging in a series of efforts to publicize it, provide the policy support for it, and endorse it actually. And so you realize most of civil society are mostly collaborating with the Ministry of Gender and Social Protection in this regard. However, we think that the DV fund, there is supposed to be a fund, a resource fund for victims of gender-based violence to be able to access this funding to support themselves to access justice. Or over the years, government has been paying lip service to the amount of money that is supposed to be allocated to that fund. And we think that going forward, that should be one area that government should look at. We also think that there is a big canker in terms of access to justice, which is the illegal fee that is being charged for survivors of gender-based violence in terms of accessing medical report. I mean, per the DV Act, there's no basis for those charges, but most of the health facilities, health professionals still continuously charge this. And we think that going forward beyond the 16 days, governments need to stamp its authority. All the necessary duty bearers, mandated agencies have to enforce the law and ensure that those illegal charges are not charged on survivors. I mean, somebody who is raped or defiled should be able to have the states, all the state apparatus supporting them to access justice. But they go to places and they are asked to pay for a medical report. Some of the police stations, we even hear that they ask them to pay for the form before they can access the form that they are supposed to take to the hospital from the domestic DOFSU at the police unit. These are unacceptable. And then we also want to see going forward that champions are celebrated. We should have a deliberate policy where we identify champions who are preventing and promoting the rights of women and children so that they can be celebrated. So in that regard, we also want to commend the Ministry of Gender and Social Protection, as well as the UNFPA and UNICEF that recently introduced an award scheme to celebrate some of the champions of issues of women empowerment across the regions. And we think that that should not be a 9-day wonder. Going forward, they should sustain that action and continue to enforce it beyond the annual affair to become, if not a quarterly, we should do a monthly affair where people are celebrated in that regard.
What do you see to be the future of this passionate campaign that you in civil society have been pushing for in terms of gender equality as well?
Hello, sir.
It appears we've lost a while there, but for those of you who've been on the lookout for that report by Albert Story, here it is. Okay, we'll get to that later for you. After a major tariff review this year, the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, PRC, has begun a process to review the utility tariffs for the first quarter of 2023. According to the Director of Research and Corporate Affairs at the Commission, Dr. Kofi Obute, this will be done to take care of the adjustments and the variables affecting the operations of the utility service providers.
We said when we're doing the major tariff that there will be a quarterly tariff adjustment. And those adjustments are supposed to take care of the exogenous variables or the variables which the utilities don't have control over. So as long as we have these variables which the utilities don't have control over, we'll have to do an adjustment to either recover the cost which goes against them, or if, let's say, they have done any under recovery or over recovery, we need to work out the numbers again to get a new tariff. So the utilities could either compensate the consumers, or the consumers will continue to pay a little bit more to compensate the utilities. The tariffs that they have been paying so far is dependent on the revenue requirement which has been given to them by the regulator. So at this point in time, the utilities are actually covering their costs, but because of, let's say, the exchange rate depreciation which is taking over the period and inflation, they've made some losses. So there's an under recovery there which the utilities have to recover. Well, as I said again, the numbers will determine whether consumers will have to pay a little bit more or they'll pay less. Or the government can decide to absorb whatever it is that is coming.
From your technical perspective, what should be the ideal?
Ideal of what?
Of whether we should pay more because there are some under recoveries on the part of the utilities.
Well, the utilities have to survive, just as we want affordable tariffs for consumers. Utilities also have to be financially sustainable or else they break down. So it's either we choose that we'll run down the utilities and have power outages, which we normally call doomsaw, and its attendant effects, or we tend that we will pay a little bit more to keep the power system running for all of us.
So once government is broke and is looking to...
Dr. Elbute says he cannot tell whether there will be an increment or reduction at this point in time.
Speak to that directly, unless the board of the commission decides that this is the way forward. Because from my point of view, I don't have all the numbers and I don't have all the answers to this particular question. Maybe the board has contacted the government, they've had discussions with government. Maybe government has decided to take portions of the cost. So if I tell you right now that tariffs will go up, I might be jumping the gun. So the board will be the right person, the right people to tell us that this is the way forward. And once the decisions have been made by the board, we'll communicate it to the entire public.
Thanks for staying with us here on The Pulse. We'll be back shortly. And thanks for staying with us here on The Pulse. The festive season is upon us again. And guess what? Your superstation, Joy 99.7 FM, and all the Joy brands have a special program for you. It's the 9 Lessons and Carols event happening on the 21st of December. It's an open and free engagement. However, you need to book your seats. And there are more exciting events that we have coming your way here at the Multimedia Group. Let's hear all about it. Adam Naite, Head of Programs here at Joy, is joining us. Hello, Adam.
Hello.
And should I say Merry Christmas ahead of time?
Merry Christmas, it's in order, right?
Yeah. So tell us about the events we are expecting tomorrow.
Yes, it's starting at 6 p.m. It's our Festival of 9 Lessons and Carols. It's annual. And we use this opportunity to say a very big thank you to our clients, our audience, and, just so they come round, we can, be together and ignite the true spirit of Christmas. So tomorrow, 6 p.m. at the Labadi Beach Hotel, we will be inside the Umanye Hall. And that's where we are asking everybody to come. We have, artists who will be performing. Celestine Donko is on the bill. Joyful Way Incorporated. You have MOG, and then we also have Kofi Usupipa. All of them will be performing for us tomorrow evening. And so, yes, like Blessed said, you're all invited. However, you need to reserve a seat so that when you come, there's a seat for you. And the numbers to send, you have just less than 24 hours to do that. Right. It's 055-111-997, and you hashtag Joy9Lessons, and then we can pick the number, and then, we will reserve the seat for you. Or you can
Early birds first.
You can simply call 0302216540 and then just tell them that you want to book a seat for the 9 Lessons and Carols. You're not paying anything. It's free.
Well, here's what we need to do because, a lot of people would want to be part of the engagement. Let's take the numbers again so that our viewers are able to follow.
055-11-11997. Right. That's WhatsApp. And then you can call 0302-216540.
Do you need to answer some questions?
No, you won't answer anything. You just call and say, I want to reserve a seat for the Joy FM 9 Lessons and Carols. That is all. You don't answer any questions. You don't pay anything.
Well, Adam, so the holidays are here with us, and many of our followers are asking, what's special on Joy 99.7 FM and the Joy brands?
Okay, so we have our very special Christmas edition on Christmas Day. I won't let it out. But on the 26th of December, Boxing Day, it's a holiday, we're asking everybody to come to Ibri Botanical Gardens for our Joy FM family party in the park. It's actually for all the Joy brands. So you will see all the people you love on Hits FM, on JoyNews, on Joy FM, Joy Sports, wherever. You find everybody there. Come and let's have fun. Tickets are selling fast here at the front desk of Joy FM. 100 CDs for a whole family of 6. And then you come and have all the fun that you can have at the party in the park on the 26th.
And beyond that as well?
Beyond that, just keep listening, because on air we also have very exciting programs for you.
We just keep asking for more, but that's where we'll leave it now. Adam98, thank you for joining us. And that's all we have for you here on The Pulse. I'm Blessed Sogah. Log on to myjoyonline.com and see you there tomorrow.